So, hello and welcome to Intuitive Connection. I'm your host, intuitive counselor, and spiritual guide, Victoria Shaw. And today we have a guest who I am very excited to chat with and to share with you. Suzanne Ross is an author, speaker, and event producer. And I have had the opportunity to attend one of her events last year here in San Diego. And it was just beautiful. And this lady really has a gift of bringing spiritual peeps together in just such a beautiful way. And I'm excited to find out a little bit about her journey and all the magic that she's doing in the world. So, Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That's going to be my new motto, bringing spiritual peeps together. I love
Yeah, well, after with all my Ivy League education, I've learned to use these really big words. That's what they were teaching me at Princeton and Columbia, like all about spiritual peeps. But yeah, no, for sure. But I loved your event last year in San Diego, and I've heard wonderful things about your Sedona retreats. And I'm curious to know, how did you become the person that brings all these amazing people together for these adventures?
Thanks so much for asking, Victoria. I truly feel it is my calling. The first time I hosted an event was way back in 2014, and I was living in Northern California, and I wrote my first book, Wake Up, Awakening Through Reflection, a 10-day life lessons workshop.
Love it.
And since it was my first book, I wanted to do a book launch event. And I didn't want to be the only one on stage for 2 days talking about my book. So I invited other authors. I got connected to other people serving in the world of spirituality and health and wellness. And so I invited them to be part of the show. And, with all of us interconnected, we invited guests and vendors. We had it filmed, and the whole thing was such a great experience on so many levels. I knew I wanted to keep doing events. And then we moved to Sedona in 2015. And as we pulled into Sedona, I just had this hit. Like, you're going to offer events here. It's going to be 2 events a year, every equinox. And so I was like, all right, I'm on it. And the first fall equinox, I offered an event. So, they just kept growing and expanding. Of course, I had a show on Voice America TV called Lighten Up TV. It was an interview-based show that got me very connected in to many people in our industry because I had to have a show every week, 52 weeks out of the year. So those people then started becoming the guests that were speaking at my retreats. And I had outdoor retreats and indoor retreats. And then finally I was like, okay, we have to have it indoors for, many logistical reasons. But let's get out into the Sedona Red Rocks. And so that's when I started offering journeys into Sedona's vortex sites, shuttling people to these sites
Oh.
where presenters would offer meditations, visualizations. Sedona guides would offer sound healing, vortex attunements. So that kind of became my signature there. And then I moved to San Diego 2 years ago, and I knew I wanted to do my second fall equinox event here in San Diego. I'll still do my, spring equinox, Sedona Ascension retreat there. But yeah, that's my story.
And what do you think is important? Because like something I've known, and I do micro retreats compared to what you do, because I actually like the smaller container when I'm leading a retreat, because it's kind of a different thing. But one of the things I find, whether it's like 10 people or whether it's like 300, 1,000 people, and I just came back from Psy Games where I saw you too, which was like 1,000 people kind of coming together, for spiritual exploration. Um, but what I find is there's something really powerful about that group experience. And so I'd love to hear that from you. Do you find that as well?
That's the main reason I do it, Victoria, honestly. It's the gathering of the spiritual community. It's connecting seekers with speakers. It's like bringing the community together in a very high vibrational environment where they can share with one another, connect, people form lasting friendships. And then another signature of my brand is that there's one main stage and there's nothing else going on
Yeah.
when the keynote speakers are on the main stage. So everyone is gathered in Sedona. It's the Performing Arts Center. It seats 800 people. So, when you have that volume of people together, we do, heart connection ceremonies where everyone's holding hands. We create a huge love vortex. And then we just drop into global impact meditations. Like that amount of people can really make a difference, not just locally, but really globally.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And one of the things that I love to highlight on the show is people living their light in different ways, right? So some of us are podcasters or intuitive guides, right? Some of us are writers. We've had Tangela Islam on the show a couple years ago who does Soul Search. So she does all these big expos. And it just fascinates me in all the ways that when we're aligned, when we're tuning in, when we're listening to our guidance, when we're following, the light of our soul, that we can make an impact in the world. So I want to hear about a little bit about like what that's like for you, because it seems to me that this is, your unique calling.
Thank you. Yes, I do feel very guided by spirit in everything I do, every moment of every day. I start out getting tuned in and then I just follow the guidance throughout the day. Of course, I do many different things as well, even though I feel like, the events is probably the biggest thing that I do. But I also offer horse retreats out here on my horse ranch in San Diego, and I got certified by equine assisted learning so that I could do, equine assisted personal retreats for small groups of people, even just one person coming out and experiencing the magic of being with these magnificent animals. And so, that's one thing. When I was in Sedona, I led people into Sedona's Red Rocks. I worked for Sedona Mystical Tours and
Wow.
led people into the Sedona Red Rocks. And I would bring my drums and, crystal bowls, and I would have crystals lined up. And, we would tune into the vortex and drop into meditations. And I'm also a certified spiritual counselor. So indoors, I would offer spiritual counseling and energy healing, and of course, I'm author of the Up trilogy, Wake Up, Rise Up, and Lighten Up, so I've hosted like big, like podcasts that went on for years. So, anyways, it's just like
So-
following the bliss in the moment, right? Like, where are you being called? And so many of us are multifaceted.
yeah.
Like, we're not just doing the one thing, and it can feel like a lot. But one day, my husband said something that just changed everything for me. He said, well, everything's connected, right? And I was like, all right, as long as everything is connected, interconnected on many levels, energetically, spiritually, promotionally, like, you can rebrand things and, then everything, just becomes part of this, one expression, in many different facets.
Yeah. You said a lot of goodness in there and a lot of different things. And one thread that I want to pick up on is that idea of following your bliss. Because I feel that when we're doing that, when we're following what excites us, what we're curious about, what we enjoy, we kind of can't go wrong. Has that been your experience?
I feel that, it's so important for me to check in with my guides, to check in with my higher self, and not impulsively say yes to something. Like, let me think about that. Let me meditate on it. Let me see if it really um, is interconnected with everything else that I'm doing. Let me make sure I'm not just, impulsively going towards something that may really not be in alignment with I hate to use the word brand, but with, my signature frequency, you could say.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit too, because, years ago, I remember having a client come to me, and this person, it was a powerhouse in Connecticut, like has a huge networking community, like just someone who's really plugged in and doing good things in the world, but they're doing a lot of different things in the world. And, so they were trying to figure out their special sauce. They were trying to figure out how to present themselves to people. And what the guide said is, it's like a soup with lots of different ingredients, and you put them all together and they taste great, but you don't have to be like, which is the focal ingredient for this soup, right? And sometimes one does, come to fruition. You're making butternut squash soup. You think about the butternut squash, but there's nutmeg and there's probably shallots and there's maybe a little bit of cream or butter or broth, right? And so I think sometimes in that left brain world, we're trying to tell a story about what we do. But personally, I like to be a little more intuitive and just flow. So that's just the one thing I take away from what you said, because I think a lot of times in that left brain marketing world, people are trying to figure themselves out rather than express and discover themselves. But I also think that you made another really good point in there, so I'm going to hit them both, and then you can see where you want to go. Because the other thing that you said, which I think is really important for people, is that nuanced difference between following your joy, following your excitement, from that place of soul, that place of deep knowing, versus a lot of the human bells and whistles about what we think would be a good idea, right? Or those momentary impulses that have nothing to do with our intuition. They just have to do with, like, ooh, the shiny thing syndrome, which is a very different thing. So I'm gonna let you you take whichever one of those threads speaks to you, maybe both.
That's a really good point. Yeah, about the, shiny object that suddenly has your attention and maybe somebody's really trying to talk you into it. And, but you have a gut feeling that, it may not be aligned. And so, yeah, I just really encourage people to take the time to really sit with it,
Yeah.
tune into your higher self, ask your spirit guides, maybe on a practical level, see how logistically it may or may not fit into your schedule or, with everything else that you're doing. So, yeah, dropping into that. And then there's also just being compelled. Like I found, myself, being compelled a lot of times to do something and suddenly I'm just in it. Like I'm gonna, I thought about writing the books, like, um, that came about because I had started doing these walking meditations. And, I would drop into, the stillness of meditation inside, and then my goal was to maintain that transcendent state as I, took these nature walks. And on these walks, I would say prayers and do meditations and practices, becoming a golden light body, walking out in nature, feeling very interconnected with all that is. And then, epiphanies would come to me. And sometimes it would feel like there was actually a voice, coming through. And on one day, this voice came through and said, "You'll write a 30-day book on the evolution of consciousness." And I was like, but I'm a personal trainer and nutrition coach. Like I'm really enjoying my spiritual path, but I don't see that becoming part of my professional journey. I mean, this is, decades ago, but I was like, all right, what was that? And as I started to unpack it, what it came to me was 3 10-day books about consciousness. And one was going to be for the mind, and one was going to be for the spirit, and one was going to be for the body,
Beautiful.
and then it all started to like fall into place. And then I was just very compelled. Like I would put pen to paper, and I had learned to channel at this point because I had been working with an intuitive guide that taught me how to run energy and to start channeling. And so these books were like automatic writing. And so really, I just, would feel compelled to grab a pad of paper and put pen to it and just start writing furiously. And so, and then, this would all become part of a sort of channeled experience that, then ultimately ended up as editing and everything else that goes into publishing a book. But and even with the shows, like I started a TV network called sci-fi.tv, SCISPI.tv, merging science and spirituality. So this genre came to me,
Right.
sci-fi.
Love
And
it.
then I just started editing shows and creating shows. And I mean, it was just coming to me like, you're going to create this show, that show, this show, that show, and pretty soon we had 8 channels and over 40 shows. And like, it was funny because one day I was editing and I got the interest briefly with Paramount Pictures who wanted to do this show about Sedona and they wanted like this professionally edited, sizzle reel. And I'm like, well, I don't have those kinds of editing skills. And so I took a walk, and on this walk, as I was walking, I was just going, I am, I can, I will, I am, I can, I will. And by the time I got back to my computer, I literally put my fingers to the keys and just started editing like crazy, like editing skills that I never had before, just came through me and into my fingertips. And before you know it, I had this like crazy edited sizzle reel. And where did that come from? So sometimes you just, it's like your mission just flows through you and you just start doing and creating and you're so compelled that that just becomes what you're called to do.
Right. Well, that's like living in alignment, right? Where you have the little bit of a nudge, you're listening, and then boom, you feel that and you run with it. And I'm curious, what is that like for you? You keep using the word compelled, right? But my guess is it doesn't feel like someone's standing behind your back and pushing you, or there's a gun to your head, or maybe it does. What is that felt sense like for you when you feel that urge?
It's irrepressible. Like people will say, well, why did you make the choice to write books? I don't think it was really a choice. It was more of a calling that was so strong. And I was being given so much guidance and support from my higher self, spirit guides, that I was given the gifts and the abilities necessary to fulfill that mission. And so, it just starts to manifest. And so I guess that's what I mean by compelled. Like you're called, you're drawn, and you're given what you need to create it and manifest it. And,
Yeah.
pretty soon, just there it is.
Right. And it's that feeling too, I think, where it's not that you can't say no, it's just that you don't want to, or if there's any hesitation, it's just like it gets overrun by like the flow of energy. That's the way the experience is for me when I've been there. It's just I often like give the example of like when I had my first child and my milk came in and I was like, she was in NICU and I'm like running down the hallway being like, now's the time, baby. Like I got to do this thing. Like nature is, and it was good. She was ready. But it's that same kind of feeling. Like it's just this internal drive that says, okay, now is the time. And you don't want to stop it.
And if you suppress it, you feel uneasy and you
Yeah.
may even start to have physical symptoms. You
Yeah.
may start to feel anxiety or depression, or you may start to actually have stress related conditions arise when you're not aligned. So, what really started my whole journey of seeking a spiritual life um, began when I was living and working back east in the corporate world. And I was so misaligned with my true calling and so displaced on the East Coast that, it really started showing up in anxiety attacks. My hair was falling out in clumps. My skin was falling off with eczema. Like, all of these things started to, build up to a point where I was miserable. And I knew that what I was doing was killing me and that I needed to do something else. And on a visit to my parents' vacation home in the desert of Southern California, I felt compelled to run to the top of this mountain. And there I just threw my arms up to the sky and surrendered and said, I'm miserable in the extreme and I see no way out. And in a moment, I felt this white light embracing me, and a voice came out of the light and it said, can't you see you've come home? You'll stay here and heal yourself and many others.
It's
And
beautiful.
that aligned me instantaneously and healed me spontaneously. I was in a hypnotic regression shown that I was merged with my higher self. And there my mission, began. And I've never looked back.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. And friends, I would say too, even if you don't get to have the top of the mountaintop peak white light experiences, and many of you can and probably already have, but even when we don't have those, like there's those tiny moments of alignment when you know. And like Suzanne said too, there's those tiny moments of misalignment when you also know.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not so tiny, sometimes they're really big, and everything in your life is shouting at you, this is not working. And if you just take those little tiny steps to listen bit by bit, you don't have to like leave everything behind all at once. But if you hold out, that little crack of space for curiosity, the steps in front of you will align, and you will find yourself back onto a more aligned path.
Thank you for highlighting that because as a spiritual counselor, I've met with a lot of people who are doing something that they don't feel aligned with, be it a
Yeah.
job, be it a relationship, be it a lifestyle. And they want to know, well, how do I get aligned with what I'm really feeling called to do? And once we identify, that maybe generally, if not specifically, then I've always instructed them to build a bridge from where you're at to where you want to be. Sometimes we can jump off the mountain and just, throw
Right.
ourselves to that which we're being called to do. But, many times it's not reasonable for
Yeah.
us to just quit our day job and jump into something that, you know, we're not prepared to, earn revenue from. Let's
Yeah.
be realistic. Like, you need to pay your bills and you need to survive and a roof over your head and a car to drive and food to eat. So, and people may be depending on you.
Right.
Getting into alignment is definitely an energetic, spiritual, emotional, mental thing. But, I always have one foot in the practical world and one foot in the spiritual world, and making sure I'm grounded and also, connected.
Right. And those two things work together because the human experience is a spiritual experience, I think. So when we can experience it that way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you forget the day to day, reality that you have, up until now created. You live within that, and how do I say this? uh, guides are not helping me right now. And then we gradually expand, and we expand to our capability. And you might do something like I did, right? Leave a marriage, leave a business, move cross country, like where no one, and just like be like, hello, California, here I come. But I got to a deep place of self trust before I did that. And there were years of my getting myself ready, right? Or you might do smaller steps. Like I tell people, like, I haven't looked back, and I wouldn't change anything, but it was a lot on my sweet human nervous system, like those are some really big leaps. And oftentimes too, it's not all or nothing. People tend to think it's all or nothing, right? Like I'm miserable in my life. I'm not well, but if I leave my job, I'll be desolate and whatever. And it's not all or nothing. Like Suzanne just said, sometimes you make a little more space for a hobby that satisfies you, right? Maybe you look into, well, maybe I'll stay in this industry, but maybe I need like a little bit more of an inspiring job. And if you listen to your intuition, if you tap into your guidance, it'll show you the next best step to get where you want to go. That's what it's designed for.
Yes. Love the
Yeah.
way that you just kind of summarized all of that.
I'm going to switch up the order because I we've been talking about intuition and we've been talking about listening to it and how it benefits you. And usually I save this one for the end, but it feels like it wants to happen now. Suzanne, I ask everyone on the show about how they personally experience their intuition, like how it speaks to them. And I've been asking this question now for 6 years because it highlights the fact that we all have such a unique relationship with our intuition and that it's different for everyone. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because we've been hitting at it this whole time. So how do you experience your intuition?
It feels as if I'm being guided to do something, to say something, and it's coming from me, but also from whether it's other aspects of me or my spirit guides. It's like it's a nudge. I mean, you really feel a nudge, and it can almost even feel like a voice,
Right.
that's guiding you. And even sometimes it can be a tap on the shoulder, like especially if you're going in the wrong direction. If you start heading in a wrong direction or you're about to make you know, a decision that's not in alignment, like there's something that literally stops me from doing something. Like I couldn't do this thing right now if I just can't do it physically. My body won't type it or, it won't start creating it. And on the other hand, if I'm meant to create it right now, then there's nothing else I can do right now but that, so I would say it can be as simple as a little whisper in the ear, a little nudge. But it can be, a tap on the shoulder and, it can be stronger to where either you physically can or cannot, do it.
Yeah, I love how you said that. And I think a lot of people will relate to that experience. All right, I'm going to switch gears. Really quickly because you have mentioned, TV network. You've been doing these huge events with with all these amazing folks in the spiritual world, amazing thought leaders and teachers and healers. You've had not a podcast, but a radio show, right, where you've interviewed probably hundreds, probably even more of like our top, the top teachers of our times. And I'm curious about and I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'm curious about like, are there some interviews or some interactions that really have stood out for you and been impactful in your own life?
Gosh, I mean, I'm sure there's, the top 10, but it's the diversity of what all of these different leaders in our industry bring in. And
I love
so
that.
my father was more of a scientist. My mother was somewhat spiritual. My sister and I really went on a spiritual journey together. But the science and the spirituality, really intrigued me. And how they merge became really important. So I set out to interview spiritual leaders, global thought leaders, but also scientists, quantum physicists. Like I've interviewed consciousness researchers, nuclear physicists, theoretical physicists, quantum physicists, like I really want to know, and then neuroscientists, the brain and like, how is the brain malleable? And so I find it really fascinating to, interview and to have as speakers, um, leaders from a wide
Mm,
diversity, a wide range of topics for our San Diego retreat. It's channelers, ET contactees, near-death experiencers, conscious researchers. I mean, we have a neuroscientist and a neurosurgeon, as well as meditation guides and sound journey performers.
right.
So I want to stay grounded in the science of things because amazingly, there's scientific support for these spiritual concepts and spiritual experiences that are transcendent. And we've really seen that come through with quantum physics, with quantum entanglement, with quantum leaps, like these different things that quantum physicists are revealing about how this quantum field is all interconnected and these amazing things that can occur within this field of quantum consciousness.
Can you share a little bit about that for people on the show who are not physicists or are not? No, I mean, I love that because I really do all believe all roads lead home. And I love being part of the world as it is right now, that it wasn't really so much like this, 30 plus years ago when I was getting my degrees, but where the science and the spirituality is not only lining up, but there's just increasingly more and more interest in where those things align. 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, when I was back, as a graduate student at Princeton, and no one would have talked about I mean, like you would have just been like out the door. And now, my good friend, she was a guest on the show, Anna Yusim, is starting, at Yale, in the medical school, a partnership between the medical school and the divinity school at Yale, right? To start to talk about spirituality and medicine, spirituality and mental health. At Columbia Teachers College, where I did my postdoc, right? They have a beautiful spirituality center there. So it's happening. And it's also happening, right? Quantum physics, all of these things have been pointing us there for a long time. So tell me about your unique take so that people who maybe are not in that world can understand it.
Well, many years ago when I was awakening, I would take these nature walks and I became so curious about this reality. Like, what is it? What are all these vibrational forms unfolding in front of me as I move through my reality? I started to become, aware of frequency and vibration and everything's energy, but I wanted to know, like, how am I experiencing reality as I move through it? And how much do I have to do with that? And so, I really started to become aware of, this idea that everything is potentials, waves of potential, um, until it's observed or interacted with.
Yeah.
And only then does it collapse into the forms, into particles of form. So it's waves of potential collapsing into particles of
Beautifully put.
form based on the conscious observer interacting with it. Like, I
Right.
mean, the implications of that individually and collectively are profound. So then we come to realize not only are we of and from the one infinite source, the one infinite creator of all that is, but we are that. We are creator beings. And how then do we consciously and intentionally create within this quantum field? So once we start to understand that we're collapsing the wave of potential into particles of form, as we move through our reality, what do we want those forms or our reality to look like? We can intentionally and consciously manifest that which we wish to create intentionally, energetically, mentally, like spiritually. It's just so incredibly, profound. And I think that, the more that quantum physicists can teach us about ideas like quantum entanglement, like super radiance. They're also, studying the brain, like, because we know that consciousness is non-local, right?
Right.
How can we remote view? We just both came from Psi Games, these incredible adults and children who are both remote viewing places distant from where we're at, and they can describe it to you perfectly. How is that possible? It's because our brain has the capacity to do that. We, as conscious beings, have the capacity to access the entire quantum field of consciousness, any point in space time, simply with the power of our intention to do that. And part of it has to do with microtubules in our brain that are crystals. These crystals that make up these microtubules allow for that. So
Right.
we're physically equipped even,
Right.
to do this. And so, with practice, we can all tap into these incredible gifts. So that was kind of a long answer for
No, that
your
was a beautiful
question,
answer. That
but
was a beautiful answer. And it's my understanding too. And again, it depends on the scientist you talk to, but the ones that I talk to are more spiritually inclined. But um, it's my understanding too that one of the things that quantum physics offers us is an explanation or the beginnings of an explanation beyond the materialist paradigm that tells us, look, the only way consciousness can happen is if it comes from your brain. And there's a lot of, and things like remote viewing, things like near death experiences, right? Things like when you take a drug and your brain quiets down and your experience ramps up. All of these things show us that, your brain at best is a filter. It's not creating consciousness, right? It's interacting with consciousness. It's made of consciousness, right? But it turns that idea that everything has to emerge from matter and gives us, the possibility, no, everything emerges from consciousness, right? So that's what I love. And I had a great conversation, and I never know the order these will go live, but friends, if you're listening, it's going to go live. It either just went live or it's going live soon. But I had an amazing conversation about this with Daniel Bronco, who I know is going to be speaking at your event in San Diego. Um, and he is a former, among other things, neuroscientist. But that man has he's done a lot in his life. So I love all of this. We have to start to wind it down. So I want to talk about the upcoming event. Friends, if you are listening to this, because I know that you may not be listening to this before September when the event happens, but fear not, because I know this lady does 2 events a year. So if you've missed one, there's another one coming and then another one after that. But anyway, let's talk about the one that's coming up. I'm going to be there supporting the podcast network. And I think that people that are hearing this on time want to know. Let's talk about what's happening at the Transcendence Retreat coming up and give the dates too, because my brain doesn't hold that information.
well, thank you for that. And it's, right in alignment with everything we've been exploring during this interview. The theme is to explore quantum consciousness and experience quantum love, because when we do tap into that field, we realize that everything is of and from this divine source of pure love. And so ET contactees like Whitley Strieber, his encounter with ETs was at first frightening. And then he realized these were benevolent, loving galactic beings in support of humanity, and became a very, spiritual transformation for him, transforming everything into love. Eben Alexander, near-death experiencer, neurosurgeon who thought consciousness came from the brain until he found himself above his body with his brain in it, fully conscious, right? And then became, a very beautiful spiritual man. And so, it goes on and on with the, hypnotic regressionists that we have sharing decades of experience, regressing people, mostly ET contactees, to reveal lifetimes of ET contact with very loving, benevolent beings.
Beautiful.
And so, throughout these experiences, near death, ET contact, hypnotic regression, channeling, plant medicine, all of these things are give us access to the
Right.
greater field of quantum consciousness, where then we experience quantum love. So that's the whole theme for the event. It kicks off with the sunset dinner cruise on a stern wheeler, cruising the bay at sunset, enjoying a three-course gourmet meal, meeting the speakers, communing with the guests, just having a glorious time aboard this beautiful boat. And then, 2 days, a full weekend of fascinating presentations that include powerful practices as well as channeling. We have Daryl Lanka channeling Bashar, Marilyn Bawaki channeling Zazar, and Christina Roche channeling angels. Then also we have a sound journey performer, the Dust of Soul. This includes meditations on the beach by people like Corinne LeBron and Aaron French. And then we also have indoor workshops as well. Lots of vendors.
Yeah.
It's with the most gorgeous resort that's fashioned after a Hawaiian resort with a giant waterfall in the lobby and tropical vegetation. And of course, it's on the beach of the bay. So
Yeah. And it's in San Diego, which, everyone should come to San Diego. Just my personal opinion. It's so magical here. It's really fun, friends. I was there last year. I'm going to be there again this year. So come out to see me, and come out to see, it's a great lineup of speakers. So, you may see me part of the time, and other times I'm going to definitely be sitting in the room because there are some amazing, amazing people coming this year. So you want to check that out. Suzanne, for people who are listening, tell them, how do they find this? Where do they go to sign up?
Thank you. The Sunset Dinner Cruise kicks off on Friday, which is September 18th, and then the weekend is the 19th and the 20th. Simply go to San Diego Transcendence Retreat.com. You're invited to use coupon code Quantum20 for a 20% discount. We're excited to have you. Bring a friend. We have a BOGO deal where you buy one, get one half off, or if you bring two people, you get the third ticket for free. So we have summer specials going on. We really look forward to seeing you in San Diego. It's going to be a life-changing retreat.
Beautiful. All right. So we'll have all that information in the show notes. And Suzanne, if people want to connect with you, see your books, get some of your offerings, maybe visit your sweet horses, whatever you're offering to the world, where can they find that information?
SuzanneRossTranscendence.com.
Beautiful. And Suzanne is with a Z, and Ross is how you think it's spelled. And again, we'll have all that in the notes. This has been so much fun. Anything else you want to share before we wrap this one up?
Embrace every single moment of every precious day for all it's worth. We've been gifted this life. Let's make the most of it.
Beautiful, beautiful. I agree 100%. And listeners, take that beautiful wisdom home with you, right? Rub it in, enjoy the rest of your day. Know that I love and am grateful to each and every one of you. I say it every time because I mean it so much. Love you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, and namaste.